We'll do a review on Lekutei Sichos in Chelek Chav Beis in volume 132. This is the last Sicha in the volume 22, the Sicha for Parshas Bechukosei. In addition to the Bechukosei, this is also a siyum of the Maseches Arochin, which is the part that talks in the Parsha about the Archim. And as it says in the beginning of the Sikha in the volume, that this discusses the idea of this day Cherem, as we'll see, and also in the Bir and the Rambam. And Orchin in Avodah in service of man. The halachas here that we're going to discuss are quite complicated, so we'll have help and come. But we'll go step by step. And let's first get the basic halacha, and then we'll see the question that the Rebbe brings down from the Minchas Chinuch and the Rebbe's explanation. Aleph, Bechukosei, Aleph, the star says that it's also the siyum of Maseches Arochin. But einer hat magdish given as dei achuza. If a person consecrated, made hegdish, a field of his inheritance. Everybody who came into Eretz Yisrael got a portion in the land of Eretz Yisrael, and they got the fields in Eretz Yisrael, and then they passed it along to their children and their children's children. So that's called a Sidei Achuza, a field of their inheritance, something that has been come down to them as an inheritance. So there are different laws between the different fields, whether you're Magdish a field that you purchased or you're Magdish a field that is your inheritance. So the Pasuk says that when one is Magdish Asdei Achuza, a field that he inherited, so then he has a right to redeem it, and then it would stay his. But U'er Hotes Nit Goyel given, and he did not redeem it. Redeem it, he'd have to pay Hegdish according to the amount of the field. But he did not redeem it. So it stays in Hegdish till Yovel. And by Yovel, it gets distributed to the Kohanim. Another case would be Oder der Gizber hat es verkauft zu an anderen. The person sold, consecrated his Zdei Achuza, gave it to Hegdish, and the attendant, the Gizber, the attendant of Hegdish, went and sold the field to another person, and the Hegdish got the money for the field, for its purposes, for Hegdish. What happens with that field when the 50th year comes? Steht in Pasuk, so the Pasuk says, V'hoyo hasode b'tzeisei b'yovel. So this field that was consecrated and nobody redeemed it, or it was sold. So what happens to the field which is either in Hegdish possession because nobody redeemed it, or in the possession of the person that bought it from Hegdish? What happens to the field on the 50th year? So he says, V'hoyo asode b'tzeisei b'yovel. So that field, when it goes out on the 50th year, on the Yovel year, it becomes Kodesh la Hashem. It's holy for Hashem. And basically, we give it to the Kohanim of that Mishmar. The Pasuk says, La koyen tiya achuzosei. So to the koyen will be his achuza, the inheritance of the field that the person has inherited in the land of Israel, ends up in the hands of the koyen because the yid consecrated it, and either he didn't redeem it or based in the gizbar sold it. So what happens with the field when the Yovel comes? Basically gives it away to the kohen. But the pasuk says not just straight kodesh laShem la kohen tiachazos. It says kizdei hachedim, just like the field of the chedim. What is the field of Achedim? So in Pashtus, the field of Achedim, what the pasuk is talking about. In the pasuk, there is a Chedim. That person says, "I want this Chedim to go to a kohen." A person can make his field hegdish, consecrate it and give it to hegdish, but a person can also say that it goes Chedim, in which the Torah says la kohen tia, that it belongs to the kohen. So this pasuk is saying, just like this day that the person says Chedim, that belongs to the kohen. So likewise here, the field that goes out from the yovel, uh, either from hegdish or from the person that bought it from hegdish, goes to the kohen. La kohen ti achuzosei. So his achuza, just like by chedim, it belongs to the kohen. The same thing is in this case is the achuza, either from hegdish or from the buyer, goes to the kohen. As is gate arus to the kohanim b'yovel, that this field that was in the possession of Hegdish because the person was Magdish Zeh, or it was sold by Hegdish to somebody else. So that field gave Tarush to the Koine B'Yovel, that goes to the Koine B'Yovel. Boom, just like the Asdeh Chedim was given to Kahanim, just like a field of Chedim that is given to the Kahanim. What is this add over here? Just like a field of Chedim. Just give it to the Kohen, and that's it. What is it teaching us? That just like we give a field of Chedim, when you say Chedim, you give it to the Kohen. So this thing, by Yovel, this field of this De'achuza that was consecrated, will also go to the Kohen. What is it just like? What is it trying to compare? So this is a question the Gemara in the end of Arochin asks. So that's what the Rebbe is going to quote her now. In Siyum Mesechtes Arochin, or Erchin, in the end of the Mesechtes Arochin, Stelzich the Gemara in the Werter, the Gemara places himself on these words of the Pasik, Kizdei hachedim lakoyen tiyachuzose. Just like the field of the chedim, to the kohen should be the achuza. The field that he owned as an achuza, and he consecrated it, goes to the kohen just like the chedim. Unfragt, the Gemara asks, Ma Talmud lemer. What is this telling us? Just like this chedim. Vos lerns the chedim. What does the Achedim teach us? On this field that goes out to the Kohanim and Yovel that was consecrated, what does it teach us? The fact that it's a Achedim. And the Gemara explains. It's actually, the Gemara is saying that this is coming to tell you a halacha not about the field that goes out by Yovel, but Punkt Fakir is trying to teach you a halacha with regards to Asdei Hachedim. Again, like we said before, Asdei Hachedim, the Pashtus, we'll see later on in the Sikha, there's another possibility, but Asdei Hachedim, the Pashtus is what? Is a person says, I want to machrim this field for the Kohen. So you're giving, basically, it's a form of giving away the field to the Kohen. You say Chedim, you give it to the Kohen. So what happens if the Kohen got a field like that? He had a Chedim, he had a field, it's not acquired, it's not bought, but he got it because somebody made it Chedim, and this Kohen ends up holding the field. Now, if the Kohen didn't do anything with it, so then again, he would so I'm pretty sure, I've got to check it up. If the Kohen got as they Hachedim, it belongs to the Kohen permanently, and no Yovel will take it out, and would not be an issue. But here, what happened is the Kohen took his Menayin lekoyen shehigdish they charomoi. He went and he consecrated. He made hegdish that field that came to him as a chedem. So what happens with that field at Yovel? A yid who gave it to hegdish, we said that by Yovel it goes out, whether it's hegdish has still it or the person bought it, it'll go out from Hegdish and it will go out to the Kohanim. But in this case, when the Kohen was Magdish, this day Charomai, and he's still holding on to his field, but it's Hegdish now. What happens with it at Yovel? Shalo Yoima. So the Kohen shouldn't say, Hoyil v'yoytze la Kohanim, since this would go out, this would go to the Kahanim. Brings from Rashi. Im lo yigoleno, if he's not going to redeem it, he made it hegdish, and if he didn't pay the money to redeem it, so it's still a hegdish. So what happens with that field? It go to the Kohanim. Shari shaloik is the achuza chulo, because it is his like this day achuza, just like this day achuza, which a person gets as inherited from his parents, grandparents, a field that from Eretz Yisrael. After Yovel, when it comes Yovel, it goes to the Kohanim, it goes out from the hands of Hegdish or the hands of the buyer, and it goes to the Kohanim. So now, what should happen to this field if this Kohen, he made it Hegdish, the Chedem field that he got, and he didn't redeem it? So he says to himself like this, Vari Tachas Yodi, but now I'm still holding it. So therefore, so what might the argument be? The argument might be, since this would go out, he didn't redeem it, so it goes out to the Kohanim. So now I'm a Kohen, Vari Tachas Yodi. It's by me. Patiently, so let it be mine. Instead of giving it, I was Kad Magdish it. Now is the time of the Yovel, so now it should be mine. V'dinu, this seems to be a Kal V'chomer. Shel Acherim Ani Zoicher. If I would get in others, if a Yid's property goes out and it gets distributed to the Kohanim, he would get a part in it also. Asdei Achuzah Pana Yisrael is Yoitzel HaKoyanim B'Yovel. And this Dei Achuzah of the Yid, we learned in the Pasuk, goes out to the Koyanim B'Yovel, so he would get a part. Hoyoli Chelek Bo. Rashi says he would have a part in it. B'Shalatzmi, now that I am holding the whole field myself, like Holskin, shouldn't I for sure be able to get it? Talmud Loimar, that's what the Pasuk says, V'hoya hasoda b'tzeisa b'yovel kodesh laHashem. When the field goes out on Yovel, this day achuzah from the Yisrael, it should be kodesh laHashem, kizdei ha'chedem chulu, like the field of the chedem, which is chulu bo l'lamed v'nim tzalamed. It's coming to teach us, seemingly, that this field, b'tzeisa b'yovel, should be like this day ha'chedem. That this day achuzah of the Yid should be just like this day hachedem of the Kohen, with regards to, but the opposite is true. It turns out that we're actually learning something about Zdei HaChedem. Makish Zdei Chermai with Zdei HaChuzah Shal Yisrael. He equates the field of the Chedem of the Kohen to the field of the Achuzah of the Yisrael. Mas de achuzo shel Yisrael, just as these the achuz of a yid. When a kohen hodos goyel given von hegdish. So here we're saying, had a kohen is the one who redeemed it from hegdish. We say the one who redeemed it, or the one who bought it from hegdish. But the will go to the kohanim. So if the goyel was a kohen, it's still yotzim betachas yodid b'yovel mischalekes l'kahanim. We take it out from this kohen and we divide it up on the other kohanim. Avs de charomei, also his chayim, it's not his, he can't hold on to it. Yotzim betachas yodid u'mischalekes le'echov ha-kohanim, and it is distributed to his brothers, the kohanim. He has no rights to it just because he's holding on to the field and he was magdish it, and his zeicherim. And when it comes to Yovel, it gets distributed to everybody. Just like if it was a Kohen who redeemed the field of a Shtei Achuz of a Yisrael, he redeemed it. And then when the Yovel comes, we will take it away from that Kohen and we'll distribute it to all the other Kahanim that are there in that time who are entitled to it. Same thing is this day Achedim, which is his original field, because he got it as a Chedim. But when it comes to Yovel, we take it out from him and we distribute it to all the living. That's what we learn from the Pasuk. That's the Gemara at the end of Aroch. Tana Rabbanan over there. The Rambam Pasket, what is the Rambam rule? He says it a little bit different over here, or a lot different. The Rambam rules that Koyen Shahoyso Lois Zei Chedim. He had a Chedim field. Now the Rambam adds a few words, Shezocha Bo Achar HaYovel. So the idea of a Kohen owning a Chedim field has nothing to do with the Yovel. He is Zoiche when a Yisrael says Charomim LaHashem, or LaKohen, I'm sorry, there's some Chedim will go to Bedek Habayis, and there's some Charomim that go to the Kohen, as he specified over there. But that Chedim goes, what is the Rambam says, Kohen Shehoyse is Dei Chedim, Shezocha B'achar HaYovel. This almost seems to say, as we'll see later on, we're talking about not a Chedim field. We're talking about a field that was distributed to the Kahanim after Yovel. He got the field. The Kohen can get the field either as a Chedim, somebody was machrim it, or he can get it as a field that came to him after the Yovel. It could be the same halacha. The problem is in the Gemara, it's talking about as the Achedim, not about a field. But the Rambam writes, let's see what the Rambam writes. He had as the Chedim, and the Rambam writes, how did he have the field of the Chedim? He merited after the Yovel, so the way it gets to the Kohen, because he got it after the Yovel. And then the Rambam also says, not like we learned about, that he was Magdish it, and he said, V'hacharimo, that he was machrim it. So now he's talking also about a Kohen being allowed to be machrim their field. We know before a Yid has a right to be machrim his field, and that goes to the Kohen. But here, the Kohen was machrim the field that he got after the Yovel. Says the Rambam, Harizu Muchremes, it gets the status of Chedim, the Yoitzo La'achiv HaKahanim, and it goes to his brothers, the Kahanim. Immediately goes to the brachas of Kahanim. No, Yovel, this is not negay to the Yovel. This is negay that the Kohen is machrim it. And we'll see, this is also surprising. A Kohen cannot be machrim, But let's just see what the Rambam writes. So the Rambam, so he gets the status of Muchremes. The Yoitzel Achiv HaKohanim, it goes to the brother Kohanim. Shenemar, he brings up Pasik. It says Lakoyin Tia Achuzosei. When it talks about the Chedem that the Kohen gets, it says it should be his Achuza, so it becomes the Kohen's Achuza. That means the Chedem that he received, but again, normally we would teach the Chedem that he received from another year, not what he got after the Yovel. But nevertheless, the Rambam brings the pasuk. It says by Chedem that the Kohen gets, like Kohen Tiachuzos, Malamech, Zdei Charm Eloik, Zdei Achuzah Yisrael. That the Chedem field that he gets has the same status as Achuzah for the Yid. Sheim Hichrimo, just like a Yid has a right to be Machrim his Zdei Achuzah, and he goes to the Kohen. So the same thing is the Kohen, which takes the Chedem field that he got. If he is Machrim, it goes right away to the Kohanim, just like Zdei Achuzah of a Yid that is Machrim, it goes distributed to the Kohanim. Miyad doesn't have to wait for Yovel immediately. Seems to be like a totally different halacha, which has a lot of problems. So we have a lot of problems with this halacha in the Rambam. Frag der Minchas Chinuch. So the Minchas Chinuch asks, so first of all, we have to have in our Pasuk, B'chlal, we were talking about that it goes out, that it goes to the Kohanim. We're talking about when it was Magdishit and we wait for the Yovel. But the Rambam is not talking about that the Kohen was Magdishit. The Rambam is talking about the Kohen was Machrevit. So, number one, from one nemt the Rambam. So, where does the Rambam take as the din yoitzel la'achav hakohanim that it goes and it gets distributed to the other kahanim, like is oich when der kohen hat machrim given zdei charomei. Also, when he was machrim this zdei charomei, not only magdish zdei charomei. The Gemara read doch nor when a kohen higdish zdei charomei. The Gemara is only dealing in a case where he consecrated the field of his chedem, not that he was machrim. B'chlal, that the machrim goes to the other kahanim, that's only by a yid. That's not, we don't see it by a kohen. What the Gemara was talking about was magdish, when the kohen was magdish. So where does b'chlal the Rambam take about machrim that it goes out to the Levi? Nochmer. Furthermore, a kohen can go to nit machrim zayin. A kohen is actually not able at all to be the din of chedem to make something chedem and go to the Kohanim. A kohen can do it. But the Mishnah sagt in Freilich and Pedig, the Mishnah says in the previous chapter, HaKohanim v'Alevim ein machrimim, the Kohanim Levim cannot make chedem. Der ganze din chedem is nicht shaykh by Kohanim v'Levim v'gzeres hakosu. The entire law of chedem does not apply to Kohanim v'Levim from the Pasuk decree. So there's no reason for the Pasuk says only a Yisrael can be machrim, not Kohanim v'Levim. It doesn't make a difference if we're talking about he owned it from before. Tzidos is given Zainab from Freyer, whether the Kohen had it from before, or Eretos Bakumen Speter Be'eza Oifen Shua, or he got it later on in any way. Somebody was machrim it after Yovel. Doesn't matter how he got it. He cannot. They can't even make metaltlin. which definitely they can own and they have, can't make chedem. In the Mishnah Zaka, the Mishnah says, with the Rambam Alein Paskuti der Halacha Shel Acher Izeh, the Rambam says in the following halacha, Karkoi metaltnim shekahanim v'levim, either the property of metaltnim the kohanim, einam machrimin eisam, you cannot make chedem them. So the kohen cannot even make chedem. Hey, frag the Minchas Chinuch, we don't find Bechlal that the chedem of a kohen should go to the levim, to the other kohanim, sorry, distribute them like by Yisrael. But being Bechlal cannot make chedem. Halt verwandelt nennt der Rambam as a kohen kemachim sein steichenomim. So what does the Rambam say? Take this halacha that if he has a steicharome, that he could the kohen shall steichem. Okay, she's talking about Harayim, but he has a steichem. How does he know that he can be machim steicharom? Base. Verwandelt nennt der Rambam, was schreibt in Sim L'Shonoi, what does the Rambam take from? What's the source of the Rambam? He writes in the end of his language, if he makes it chedem, it becomes immediately chedem. In Gemara, where blows der Mond, and the Gemara, it's only mentioned. And again, we're assuming that this is the same Gemara that we said in Orchin before, that Litzalom, that Yoitze Le'echav HaKohanim. There's no other source for this, but so that's the halacha that we learned, that if it was magdish, it goes out l'achav hakohanim, and the Rambam says also machriv the nishna v'lisha meloshin zeh, and it has been repeated and duplicate, tripled in this language also l'achav hakohanim. Es steht aber nicht in Gemara as melenim taruis, but it doesn't say in the Gemara that we learned she'im hichribo hi muchremes miyad, that if he was machrim, it becomes right away chedem. That would be from the din of chedem when a person says cheisrovan, but the din of a kohen that is machrim or magdish, we says magdish. We don't learn about that halacha that he's machrim, that it should go right away out to immediately. Maybe you have to wait as in the pasuk over here. And number 3, Gimel, the Loshna Rambam b'tchilas halacha shezocha b'achar hayevul. What does the Rambam mean that he was zocha after the yevul? Is a ganze nicht verstanden. It's totally understood. Yevul hot kein shayches nit zu chermei kohanim. Yevul has no connection. The chorem that a kohen gets has nothing. The distribution that comes to Yevul has nothing to do with chermei kohanim. A kohen is zoche in the charomim ständig. A kohen is always going to merit the charomim. Sai lifnei hayevul, sai b'yevul, sai la'achar hayevul. Whether it's before the yevul, on yevul, or after the yevul. If you make it chedem la'kohen, the kohen gets it. With the Rambam paskin ba'alocha shalifnei, as the Rambam rules in the halacha that precedes this, as the chermei kohanim, that the chermei kohanim harei elu nitonim la'kohen sheboisem mishmar b'shosh echli. When you make a chedem and you give it to the kohanim, you give it to them in that mishmar in the time that was machre. So, what does the Rambam mean that he was zoicha after the yovel? The chedem, you're not zoicha after the yovels. Chedem, you get immediately. So this whole piece of the Rambam is not understood. But this is all, we don't understand because we're looking about the Chermei Kohanim. Maybe what the Rambam means here is not Chermei Kohanim, but what it means is the distribution of the field in the Yovel that goes to the Kohen base. Remember, we can't zogen this is mashma from a fortune. We could say, as it appears from the commentators, as v'cherimo, though when it means v'cherimo over here, made the Rambam nit cherme kohanim. He wasn't talking about cherme kohanim. Nor cherem lebedek habayis or cherem l'shamayim. He means the cherem that either goes to for money to support and to fix up the Beis Hamikdash, or it goes Cherem l'Shamayim, which it goes for Hekdesh, was Oich wegen Zeir in Halacha Shlifnezeh, which the Rambam also speaks of the laws preceding this. Un koyin shehoyso lois dei cheder shezocha b'achar. So what does it mean, a koyin that had a cherem field that he merited after the Yovel? Meit oich, this also means asode cherem lebedek habayis, a field which is as they cherem for bedek habayis, was is in them zoiche achar Yovel, which he merits after the Yovel. The reason why they're called as they cherem, we're talking about the part that the kohen gets after the yovel, that is mischalik to the kohen. Why does the Rambam call it cherem? Because it's the way it lechatchila it was cherem lebedek habayis. That means when the person said cherem, it went legavoya, cherem l'shemayim, cherem lebedek habayis. It went to Hashem. It went to the bedek habayis. So what it means is that the koyin shehoysa lois dei cherem shezocha b'achar hayovel, because we're talking about not a person gave a koyin a cherem, but the kohen was magdish to the bedek habayis, made oich asod the cherem lebedek habayis, and after it comes Yovel, we say that it goes out because it was his cherem, and he gave it to the bedek habayis. So then it goes out, said it's in them zoicher achar Yovel because it's his zoicher after the Yovel. It's all specific dinim and needs to look more, but just to answer that, we're not talking about a field that he got as a cherem from another from a Yisrael, but we're talking about a field that belonged to Bedek Habayis, because he was machrimit, the kohen was machrimit to Bedek Habayis, and the field goes out to him, to the owner, after Yovel. And that's what the Rambam was talking about. So that way, we understand what it means, because he sort of gave it away to the Bedek Habayis, and the Bedek Habayis gives it back to him. It goes back to the owners after by Yovel. It goes back to the owner, so he gets back his field, and that's when he gets it. That's when he gets it, and that's what the Rambam says. If he was machrim it, he can be machrim it, that field that belongs to him, and that would go to the other Kohanim. But the Rebbe says this is over nit glatik b'loshen harambam. This does not fit in loshen harambam that we're talking about as they miknos. We're talking about a soda that was muchram to the bedek habayis, and he got it after the yovel. The Shana Nesvazer was the Zet Sorichin from Vanity is the Mocker from the Din Rambam. Where does the Rambam know this halacha? This is a new halacha about a field that was became the Koyans after Yovel. Is consumed L'Shonim Malamed Shesdei Charomai Loi, that this Dei Charomai belongs to him. Is mashma as I read by Chemrei Kohanim that we're talking about Chemrei Kohanim. Ois Gimel. Benegeya the dritter Shaila Hanal Sif Aleph for Minchas Chinuch. As far as the third question of the Minchas Chinuch in Sif Aleph, question was, what does it have to do if it was a Zdei Chedem of the Kohen has nothing to do with the Yovel? The Zdei Chedem goes to the Kohen whenever the Yid is Makdish a Chedem. So he says, "Benegay the dritte Shal Nal Minchas Chinuch is mashma von anderen Beforshim." So it appears, understood from other Beforshim, as mit die Wörter shezocha bo achar hayevel. The Rambam means the zocha hayevel meint do the Rambam an ander fall. He's not talking about the chedem shezocha bo achar hayevel, because chedem you're not zocha after the yevel. But here the Rambam is talking about a different case. Uns darf stehen, and it needs to be written, there's missing an oy. Or there's ilu with the Rambam will be geschrieben, or it is. Oy shezocha b'achar hayevel. That means he's talking about two separate cases. We're talking about Azdei Achuzah Shel Yisrael. Was der Yisrael at Magdish given on Leipoda. If he consecrated and he wasn't redeeming it, was then multi Yitzel LaKohanim b'Yovel. Is euch azab feld can the kohen machrim sein. He's talking about that he can be machrim. He can be machrim either a field that he got as a chedem, that's nothing to do with the yovel anytime, or if he received it after the yovel, as the achuz of a yid, he can be miyad. If he makes chedem, he becomes chedem immediately. Man darf noch aber verstehen, but you still need to understand. Why does he specify and say koyin shahoy solo is the chedem? The koyin is the chedem. So over there, we're saying as the chedem seems like it was something that was given to him as chedem. Besim l'shoyne is the limud from posik zok nor, but in the end he only says melamed shezdei chermei loy. So you see, in both cases, first the Rambam talks about zdei cherem. Even if you want to say that it also means ki'ilu, where it says zocha b'achar hayevel, it says oisha zocha b'achar hayevel. So how come the Rambam writes in the beginning koyin shoysel is zdei cherem, and in the end he says melamed shezdei chermei loy? There's no mention of anything else which is not cherem. In the Etzem Shaila from the Rambam, on the question itself on the Rambam, as Koyanim ein Macharim. Koyanim kilchal ben Macharim. How do we bechlal do Chedem? How is the Koyan Macharim? Both men bepashit, we can't answer. So you could have answered this simply. Lidasa Rambam, according to the Rambam's opinion, is those vos Kohanim ein Macharimim karkos. The fact that Kohanim cannot make Chedem karkos, It's not just Torah says, just no, that's it. Adin in Gabra, that this is sort of a law that the person as by Kohanim, this status a Kohen, the Gabra Kohen, is the the ganze din v'chram. There's no holding v'chram. We can say no. Nor sa'adin in chefzo yinichse hakohen. But rather it's a law that has to do in the object, the assets of the Kohen. As it is precisely emphasized in the change of the language of the Rambam. In the Mishnah is the Lashon. In the Mishnah, the Lashon is not Kohanim v'Levim and Machrimim. That is, the Kohen Levim cannot do Machrim. Und der Rambam schreibt, but the Rambam writes Karka v'Taltlim sheKohanim v'Levim and Machrimim also. He puts it on the Chefzer that the Karka, the Metaltlim, the Kohen Levim, you cannot be Machrim them. What's the time of them is? What's the reason on that? Is the Rambam is Mamshich. Because the Rambam continues, the pasuk says, by the field that it is your eternal inheritance. That is written by the cities of the Levim that they got from the land when the Eibishter divided up the land. The Levim got the 48 cities. Und der Ribe is der Din Dafke by Sodes was eine Be'etzem Zeire mit Tzadnitzinas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why this law that they cannot be Machrim applies only in fields that are the essence there because the Eibishter gave to them. Those are the Sodes in Ore Levim, those fields in the cities of the Levim, was Yoshua was saying that was the inheritance from the father. Ubenegei this Sodes. And as it relates to these fields, isn't it shaykh as mizol ze machrim zayin? So you can't be machrim them because they will always belong to the Levim. Weil durch them wird nicht geachuse von sie. Because when you're machrim them, you extract, take out that inheritance, that hold from them. The Torah says it should be in the Torah's neural hold for them. Oh, but as they but when you're talking about a field of Achedim that the Kohen received, the Baldos is nit achuzos, it's not an inheritance, Kenados Machim Zayim. That's why it could be Machim. So the question was, how could you be Machim? Because according to the Rambam, fields that have not been given as an achuzos could be Machim, perhaps. Thus is aber lechayda nit maspi, but this is also not sufficient. According to this, is those was the Kohen can machrim zayin. This that the Kohen is able to be machrim is as nit val si is they charamoy. It's not because it's his field that was favorite, nor val si is nit achuzose. It's not his cherba and therefore belongs to him, and that's why he can be machrim with no fakeret. It's not his achuza, nit achuza shalom shaloi. But the Rambam gedacht mat design, so the Rambam should have answered that koyin shoy solos deicheden. So mat ze nit koyin shoy solos deicheden. It's not that he has a deicheden. That's not the reason why he can be matgish. No, that's the way karka. Is nit achuzas elam loy. We're talking about a property which is not inherited forever for the kohen. You should say if he had a field that he come from a yid or the kiyetziva, to emphasize that it's not his. It's dafke because it's not an inheritance for him. So it's difficult to explain the Rambam. The idea itself, as the Chedim is Chaval, this Sodi is Nitach Uzose Mamish, that the Chedem applies because it's not really achuza tzorich needs to be understood. The limud with the Rambam bring them hekesh. The way the Rambam learns the comparisons, dei charomei to dei achuzon, is betoichen hopchi veres in Gemara. Is the idea is just the opposite than as in the Gemara. The Gemara is up makis dei charomei is dei achuzon shel Yisrael. We quote it charomei to feel the mas dei achuzon shel Yisrael yitzum metachas yodei. Because the achuz of the Yid goes out from him and it gets divided to the Kahane. Das heißt, we learn top Zdei Charome from Zdei Achuza. We learn out Zdei Charome from Zdei Achuza Shal Yisrael. Welcher der Koyen not peidig them in Hagdish. So when the Koyen redeemed it from the Hagdish, so then what happens in Yovel? The Koyen, it gets distributed to the Kohanim of that shift. As Kshem Bidort is just neat, Zaina, just like over there, it doesn't remain his when he was goyal from the Hegdish. Was his Yaitse B'tachas Yodei, and it leaves then Avs Dei Charomoy, Yaitse B'tachas Yodei, who also the Zdei Chedem also goes out from his hands. When he was Magdish, it goes out and gets distributed to the Kohanim. In the Rambam of it is the Loshen, the Rambam says Malamed, Shezdei Charomei Loi, Kidei Zdei Achuzah Yisrael. Now the Chedem field for the Kohen is just like field Achuz for Yidden. Usmas Mousi is, the understanding is, the Bailus of Zdei Charomei, the ownership on the Chedem field is Punkt V, the same as the Sode Achuzah Yisrael, was that can see machrim sein, that he is able to be machrim just like the Yid could. But this explanation is because he doesn't really own it. And here the lotion is that it actually belongs to him. Hey. I say, so we can say the explanation in all this by introducing was the chinuch is masvir the sharosha mitzvah von din charam. The chinuch explains the roots of this mitzvah of the laws of charam. He says, "Lifi Yisrael hu ha'om asher bachar kela v'idase." Because the Jewish people are the nation that Hashem chose to serve him. Ulahakir shemoy, and to recognize his name. Veheim einom tachas memshelis hamazolis. They are not under the dominance of the consolation Asher Cholak Hashem Yisbarach la'amim min ha'umes, that Hashem has separated for the nations of the world to the other peoples. The Yidden are underneath the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, mibli emtsos malach u'mazel, without the intermediaries of any angel or any consolation. As the pasuk says, Chelek Hashem Amoy, that his people are a part of Hashem. Yaakov Chevel Nachalosei, there are a rope of his heritage. So on them they will not rest. Only goodness and the flow of blessing. The Ruach Nediva, a benevolent spirit, the Tara and purity, Tis Nechem, will lean on them. But the opposite, that is the curse, and the Chedim, the name Shal Yisrael. That is on the enemies and those who hate the Jewish people. And therefore, when person's is short of spirit, gets angry, and he will express from his mouth, will bring out the language of a curse and a chedim al mamoina on his money, the karka and on his properties. Shehem tachas habrocha, they're under the blessings, and he says a curse, chedem. Idea hakosu, the pasuk notifies him, she efsher loy lehitziyai mirshus amaveirach lishus achar. He cannot take it out from the domain of the blessed to another domain. Lefi shakol asher Yisrael, because everything that belongs to a Yid Shem Chelek Hashem Yisbarach loyal. They're a part of the blessed. Hashem belongs to Hashem. Mashakona Evet Kona Rabbi. Whatever the slave purchases, owns, is owned by the master. Nevertheless, once we know truthfully, kikavonas hamachrim, the one who intention of the machrim is to take it out of his possession. So it's fitting to fulfill his wishes. Let it go back to the possession, to the domain of his master. And let it be kodesh, etc. And for this root is what our sages of blessed memory say, that everything that is owned by the Levim Kohanim, whether it's property or movables, you cannot make them chedem. To say, even if the Kohen Levi says about his field, that it should be chedem, it doesn't grab hold at all. Because he is resting in the house of his master, the place of blessing and kindness, the good. Whatever he owns belongs to Hashem. Within the bracha, there is no place for a chedem, God forbid. That's what the chinuch writes. But l'chayri is nicht verstanden. So similar is not understood. Der Chilik zwischen a Yisrael was can machrim sein und a Kohen Levi was ein machrim. What's the difference between a Yid that could make chedem and a Kohen that can? Euch by Yisrael is das ein machrim. Is doch ein machrim l'chedem chalila. By Yid we also say there's no real room for chedem. Und wie sagt früher, as he says earlier, you cannot really take it out from the domain of the blessed to the other domain. Says below is why, how come it does work? Once we know truthfully that the intent of the one who's doing the chedem to take that object out of his domain, it's fitting to fulfill his desire. The Yoshua Lishus Adonai, let it go back to the master's domain. The Kodesh be Kodesh. And for Bozom and Azoni Zog Moich when a Koyin or a Levi Zayin Machen. Why don't we say the same logic when a Koyin or Levi make Chedem? As is Yitzim Rishus, so be Kodesh, it should go up Rishus and be Kodesh. Nor the Chilik is, but what is the difference? The Chosim when I Yisrael, we're talking about assets of a Yid, the Baldas, they're Shaykhs to Chilek Hashem Yisbarach. Since their connection to the part of the blessed Hashem is nit mitzad un in zei gufa, it's not in the assets and in the assets itself, nor mitzad them eden, but that's because of the yid, mashakona evet kona rabbi, so whatever the slaves owns, the master owns, the riber choch as is nitchal that inyan hachedem hepach habroch ala nechosim, although it doesn't rest the idea of chedem, which is opposite of blessing on the assets, not as ver kodesh, but it remains kodesh. Vibald ober as dos was the Torah is dos meitzi b'rishusay. But since why does the Torah take it out from his possession? It remains is sibosa kavona samachrim. It's the reason is because it's the intent. The person wants to give it away. The cheftzei. The desire of his heart, which is expressed using Lashon Chedem, was it not the notes that he used, was mitzad in nechosim, mitzad atzmei, both as he can chalzai. The assets on its own, they could. It's the Yid who is a Evid Mashkon Evid Kon Rabbi is Chala Koponim the Shem Chedim of the field. The name Chedim does rest on the field. Und der Hepech Habrocha ben Nechosim Eli ben Negeya the Machrib. So what is the opposite of the blessing? What happens to these assets as it connects to the one who made the Chedim? Says Yotze B'Reshusay. It goes out. He's no longer in charge. He gives it to the Eibushter. V'yoshel Reshus Hadoino v'yid Kodesh. It goes back to the domain of the master and becomes Kodesh. Umidosis Kipshutei, as it's simple as Yvet Nongru is the Chedim. It's a Chedim film. Shenke by Kahanim Levim, as opposed to by Kahanim Levim. Baal does the Nechosim Atzmum Zayin. The assets themselves are Kishoichen, based on Doinov, Mokoim Abracha Vachesed. They are resting in the place of the master, which is the place of blessing and kindness. Whatever he owns belongs to Hashem. This is the asset. This is Zeb Nechosim B'Chayach. And their asset doesn't apply. We can't connect Afilu with Shem Chedim in a gear, the Karnim Levim, even the name of Chedim as associated with the Karnim Levim. Was all Geidim Zayin Yitziyah B'Rishus, which would cause to go to the Rishus. It even remains in their Rishus because the assets themselves are the Mekayim HaBrocha, and therefore we don't even take it out from the Rishus. But Baal that those was Kahanim is Machrimim. And since this that Kohanim make Chedim is Vail of Zeir Achuza, Ein Machrimim, it's kind of Machrim, cannot be, is Vail of Zeir Achuza, can it Chal Zayin the Shem Chedim? Because on their inheritance you can't have the name Chedim. The Ribir is a Kohen was of Bakuman as the Chedim from Yisrael. Therefore, a Kohen who received a field of Chedim from a Yid, was if mitzad atzmed, he can zayin the Shem Chedim. On that field itself, there could have been the name Chedim. Can chal zayin if the Shem Chedim, you can rest on it. Can rest the name Chedim. Afilu b'zeh she'zin ben zi Shem b'rishus hakohen, even if it's already in the domain of the Kohen. Valderech zeh, in a similar way, asodi shel Yisrael, v'zocha ba Kohen achar haYevo. If he was zocha after the Yevo, was the Achuza is not given Shoichen base Adonov. It wasn't in the master's house because it didn't belong to the Kohen beforehand. But Mela is in Ir given an Efshori, so it had a possibility as his own Nechem, where now they are Israel. The Yid could have made it Cheder. Bleibt the Efshori is when the Soda comes on some Kohen, that possibility remains even when it comes to the Kohen. Und das lernen der Rambam Arois. The Rambam learns this. Shenemar la koyen tia chuzosei. Melamed teaches shestei chermei loi kizdei achuzo Yisrael as the field achuzo Yisrael. She'im echrimo im muchremes miyad. That if he makes it chedem by the Yid, it's muchremes immediately. As the soda hat adin v'asudei achuzo Yisrael nit v'achuzo shel koyen. It has a din of a field of achuzah for a Yid, not as the field of a Kohen. Those was their stay chedim, or this day Sodesh Zochav Achar Yevu. This Muchrem as the fact that this day chedim that came to the Kohen, or the field that he merited after the Yevu is Muchrem, it becomes chedim, is neat as Zoy Mitzad HaShlila. It's not so much because of the negation, weil das ist nicht Achuzosei, welches ist gesagt worden, Achuzosei Milahem. It's not part of his Achuzah about which it was said that it should be Achuzosei, nor Mitzad Achiv. But this is actually because of the positive, I'll see as they Charomei. It is a field of Cherem, of Yiddish Chalgim and Shem Cherem. There was already the name Cherem on it. The Sodot had the Afshoriyas from Cherem, it had the possibility of Cherem. In this Khalil. But Mela werd od die soda viel noch an onkom b'shus to this field, even after he reaches the domain of the Kohen, nit the achuzos was is geshoichen beweis Adonov. Still not going to be like resting base Adonov, when the river im huchremes, im huchremes, miyad. If it is makes a cherem, it becomes immediately muhremes because it becomes like his, like this, because it had the possibility of becoming cherem in the beginning. Und das ist der Chiluk from the Hekesh in Gemara. This is the difference from the way the Gemara compares it. Maz de achuzah shel Yisrael yitzu mitachas yodei. Umitzchalekas lekohanim des, like this de achuzah of a yid would, even if the kohen was the goyel, still he have to divide it to the kohanim. Avzdei charoma is also the field that he has as a chayim. Yitzu mitachas yodei mitzchalekas lekohanim. He can't hold on to it. He has to leave his hand and it's divided to his brother kohanim. That's what the Gemara says. The limud in Rambam, and what the Rambam says in Gemara is the limud. In the Gemara, the learning is as bleibt nit seiner, that it doesn't remain here nor mischalak kohanim, that it's gets distributed to his brother kohanim. In Rambam is the limud. In the Rambam we learn shezdei charomalek de achuzul Yisrael that it gets right away cherem as is chalav yishem cherem. Since yoytzim rishusay, that it goes out of his rishus, that it could get cherem. When it's vet kodesh b'kedusha saguf and becomes the kedusha to kedusha saguf. And the Rambam nentus aruis umaskonas alon. The Rambam takes this, gets this from the conclusion of the Gemara. The Gemara says, "Sal kadai tachamina." You might think, "Oh, you see, brachuzas oilom hu lohem." Honami achuzosei he. So you shouldn't take it out from the, because he got it as a chayim. So you shouldn't take out, shouldn't go out b'yoyim. Honami achuzosei. This should also be his achuzah. Kamash malon achuzosei achuzosei. Achuzosei ein charon aloi. As mikum b'ikar shoyl zayin, that, so we're saying that we're coming mainly to reject as charomoi ver nit achuzosei, it doesn't become his achuzah. Achuzosei in charomoi. Why? Because it already has the name cherem. Mainly is chaliv then the din b'shem cherem, the law and the name cherem. Zayin. L'chayr is dos achidush semachad zayin atam bedin, to create this new novelty that there's a reason halacha on the chinuch, based on the chinuch. And to make a difference in halacha. With them was the din is their chuzos, their chedim, that this is connected, that the laws of their chuzos, their chedim, are in the parsha, when they set arachim, that they're in the portion and in the tractate of arachim. Was called Inyan arachin is verbunden mit ham besefer. The entire idea of arachin is tied to reason and logic. Stop is the shovit from Hazocher Miben Essen, but Ben Shishim, you evaluate what is the value of a male between 20 and 60. Before how much is a female? It's logical. They shivu b'hashonim, their value in the year, shalifnez of shlachos, before and after. That erech odom al yidei, the value of a person, the herech oisa hakoyin, that the brain evaluates, that erech behema, the value of behema, the herech hakoyin oisa, the koyin should evaluate. That inyan hatam badas, the idea of reason and knowledge is da'azikul negeya. This is so important. This becomes the law right in the beginning of tractate Orchin, Hakum La Ruchin, La Suyamai. Everybody can evaluate. Who are we coming to include when we say everybody? La Suyam Mufla Samuch Leish. We're talking about somebody who's almost a man, he's 12 years old, a year away. The Baldas, the ganzen Indian from Orchin, is since the whole idea of evaluation is logic and reason. So if it's logical and reasonable, even a child, even a mufla samach lish can do that. But there's a lemon up in the gate to charamim, and similar we can also learn as far as the charamim v'chazayin and oishbet parshas, Masech the Orchim, that are also in the portion and the tractate Orchim, as the gedorim medinim shalahem, that their definition, the laws, and a nitking zeres akosuf nor mitzad the top. They're not just a decree of the post, but there's reason. The Rebbe learned the Rambam them see my Gemara. So the Rambam learns the end of the Gemara. Komash malon achuzosei, achuzosei in charam eloya. Das ist verbunden mit dem Tamm wie Yuchel, was ist da bei Charome, especially by Charome. B'meila kum davon arois, as Charome can akoyer yem achrim sein. That he is actually allowed to make chayrim, even though it says beferish that he cannot be machrim. But if it's somebody else's, if it had the potential, if it belonged to a yid, then the chayrim could take place. Ches, since you do the sipur mit Rabbi Hillel Paritcher, it's known the story with Rabbi Paritcher is eigentlich ein German. While he was a young man, had the gewollt senden Alten Rebbe, he wished to see the Alten Rebbe. Now, Basil had zugeredet Akashi, he had prepared a question himself to order. Zu fragen den Alten Rebbe, to ask the Alten Rebbe. Wie nur der Alte Rebbe ist reingegangen in den Zimmer. Soon as the Alter Rebbe entered the room, wo Rabbi Hillel hat sich gehabt behalten, wo Rabbi Hillel had hidden, hat Rabbi Hillel der Herd, wie der Alter Rebbe sagt, Rabbi Hillel heard. The Alter Rebbe was saying, Benigan, how you do, and the known tune that he would say, as a Yungeman hat Akash in Orchin, if a Yungeman has a question in Orchin, darf früher sichtbar sein, he needs to evaluate himself first. Yashleima, das ist wenn wrote to Rabbi Hillel. This was a lesson for Rabbi Hillel for the rest of his life. Do as it's known that Hogah for Rabbi Hillel and Yedurim was serious in the Yosef, that he was very careful, all kind of perfection, and very careful, unusually, in a very extreme way. Now, but according to the above, he's not the Rinja from the Orchem verbunden mit Tam Baskol, the Rinja of Orchem is connected to reason and understanding. But he came out from the Yisrael for Rabbi Hillel is Gorbashtan, and the main advantage and greatness of Rabbi Hillel consisted of in them was it is given, and David Hashem, he served Hashem. When in them was it is given a maskil nifla, not in the fact that he was a outstanding scholar or understanding a maskil, is the Bir was as he in his sentence explanation. This is actually the same reason. B'shas men is when you evaluate yourself, that one kommt to the Haskola Lavone, then you come to the understanding and the grasp as Iker Havoida is needed in your Puntam Badas, that the main the idea service is not the reason and understanding that our Kabbalah said, but accepting the yoke, Zayin and Ovid Hashem, to be a servant of Hashem, or be servicing Hashem. But those this expresses itself in the end of the Masechta, in the idea of Charomim, it is machrin nit nor in the chosm. Not only does he make chayim the asset, zol nit hanom from nichse gash misoinu notion helen, that he should not benefit from the assets, the physicality of the world, which is a language of obscurity in their oich koiches nafshi, but also the powers of the soul. Azay zol zayin b'shus adonov. But this powers that they should belong to the master, Kedoshim of Dolim from Yonabel Mazah, to be holy and separated, distinct from worldly matter. Till as the Charomim that they as Einlam Pigeon, lo Yemocher lo Yego, they can't redeem them, can't sell them, can't redeem them. Zeven Kedush Saguf, they become Kedush Saguf, Bizal Derem, this is given by Rabbi Hillel, similar to what was by Rabbi Hillel, as Mitzad Global Yerusha in Precious from Yonabel Mazah. Because it's great being careful and separated from worldly matters. His body alone sensed what's a darfton that he needs to do and via darfton and how we should do it. Shaz that Hogah from Aiden is way from Kazev, when the conduct of a Jew is in such a way as it is machir milyon of agashim is that he his machir puts away his physical and his physical matters and his physical strength powers. In a way of holiness and this separation now is that so for sure this is so in his speak literally as it is that he's very careful in his speech. He cannot even go out of his mile even a language of a hipik habracha like cheder. When damult is by emrak toivel b'shem habracha, is only good and the flow of blessing. Bis ba'ifim v'sis ba'koyanim v'levim, till the extent as it is by the Kohanim Levim, as Kolish Yisrael, that every Jewish person, Hashem Baruch, whose spirit is benevolent, can the tzutzukumen, is able to reach the libodel lamed l'fnei Hashem, to separate himself, to stand before Hashem, the shorsu la'ovdei, to serve Him and to worship Him. As Demot has in his Kaddish Kodesh Kadoshim, he becomes holy of holy, v'yeh Hashem chelkim and achlosei, and Hashem becomes his portion, his inheritance, forever and eternity. Also all of his assets, Pshita called one of the bases, certainly his children and his home. They're all resting in their master's home, in the place of blessing, kindness, and good. Comes down in the visible and revealed good, in living children, and plentiful in the sustenance of food, never praised that this should be for all Yidden wherever they are. This is Mesichas Yutes Kislev Shabbos Parshas Vayeshev Tavshin Mem Aleph.